the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, here for you for a little Wednesday Q&A. Holy shit, whoa. All right, Axiom Verge is on sale on Steam. How about that? Well, talk about that later. Woo. Or not on this show. Anyway. Boy, video games. The spice of life. Anyway. Which, by the way, I think I mentioned this before, but yes, Game Talk is coming back for episode 226 on. Episode 225, right now I am scheduled to have a guest on for episode 225, so it should be a very interesting conversation that is had. I'm sure we'll talk about some other things as well. It won't just be like a single issue show. But speaking of single issue shows, episode 224 of Sovereign Tech, holy fucking shit. Like, this episode went on fire. It has almost 2,000 reshares and likes on Twitter. That was the episode that I did. It was called The Gender Spook. I had the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on. I'm really reaching out to a whole new audience. And finally, in fact, I went out and bought the biggest fucking pizza I could. No big sausage pizza jokes, folks. To celebrate that, because of that, I actually finally broke into, on Twitter, I broke into the 5-digit followers range. I'm up to like 10 point, or like I'm over 10,000 anyway. So, very exciting time for Sovereign Tech, certainly, for that kind of reach. We'll see how it all pans out, going into the future. Did get some new patrons this week. Welcome to everybody new on Patreon. And I got a lot of emails about the episode, The Gender Spook, and I will be getting to those. One in particular was actually very well written, well thought out, and argument being made, not necessarily in opposite direction, but to discuss it. And I am going to get to that email, and I'll get to all of your other emails. I'm not going to make this episode all about gender. You can let me know, though. I would actually, if you want to message me and let me know, I'm willing to have more people on to talk about that episode. Either have Stephanie on, I could even have MK, maybe I could have MK Lords on, via Hangout or something, or, someone else. It's definitely possible to have other people on, for that sort of thing. Now, I mean, I'm not necessarily interested, and I don't know if I even have the stroke to be able to bring on really bigger names. I know a lot of people have wanted me to talk to Jordan Peterson and everything. And I'm still working on doing sort of the debunking episode around, or not debunking, but, deconstructing episode around him, and others. But yeah, let me know if you're even interested in, kind of hearing that, or maybe I'll just reply to these people, via email or something. So anyway, so very, very exciting about that episode is getting so much reach and so much play, quite a few thousand plays already, which is, just really, really cool. I mean, that's not like a subject I'm going to talk about often, in fact, you know what? One of the emails I got was, I don't. This wasn't a long one, but all right. Let me just say this, okay? Regardless of what it said. Look, I'm not a person that I don't, and I've said this on Sovereign Tech for years. I don't believe in incrementalism. I don't think incrementally. I don't think in between solutions. I don't think any of that shit really works. I don't think it's worth putting in a whole lot of time. If something kind of exists and maybe it takes you like almost no effort to take advantage of or something like that, yeah, maybe. But like I am absolutely a radical. I mean, like I talk about this all the time. Like my belief in, or my plan in how to get more freedom, how to get personal freedom, how to have liberty in my lifetime, is kind of as the Free State Project mantra goes, is to just find a few people that are like-minded. And honestly, I don't think you can get a whole lot of people that are like-minded enough, but find a few people that are like-minded, and just go somewhere, wherever that happens to be, and just enact the principles, that I believe. Because, I mean, this is the thing. Look, I mean, it's not my saying. It's a saying that's been around for a while. I mean, if you only follow your principles when they're convenient, they're not principles. I mean, it's just opportunism. Principles are only principles when you stick by them, even when the chips are down, even when, when everything's going to shit. That's the only time that they're actually principles. So yeah, I'm not a guy that believes in incrementalism. I don't believe in this notion that we need in between stuff. I know, I mean, a few years ago, I don't think I was in the minority, at least in the liberty movement and anarchism, thinking that. A few years ago, everybody was like, yeah, no, you don't even vote for Ron Paul, right? Don't do any of that stuff. Obviously now I'm in the minority as far as thinking that, you want to stick to your principles no matter what's going on. But, oh well. Anyway, I'm just saying, folks, I'm really not one for incrementalism. Just spend all the time. In fact, I'm trying to remember. I think there was it was kind of a dumb article, but it was by the guy that wrote Moneyball or something, where he said that he was kind of trying to praise laziness. And that was a clickbaity, title. That was horseshit. It had nothing to do with laziness. But the whole point of the article was saying that it's better to spend 10 years, doing the right thing, or getting to the point to where you do the very right and not perfect, but the thing that actually, achieves the real goal that you have, than it is to do, spend 10 years doing a bunch of little shit and never really getting to the big stuff. And I mean, there's a bunch of arguments that could go, either way with that. But that's kind of my thing. It's I'd rather spend, 3 years making something fucking amazing, or doing, or building personally to a point, than spending 3 years just looking at, okay, well, how can this give me this little bit of extra freedom and this little bit? I'd rather just build it to where I can go all the way. And I really think that's possible. And that's not a new idea in anarchism. I mean, Peter Kropotkin talked about it. A lot of people back when individualist anarchism was more of a thing, which, these days in anarchism, it seems like trying to go for some kind of greater good is the order of the day, which I find to be very strange. So anyway, all right. We're going to talk about all tech here. So there's your little bit of philosophy for this week, because the rest of this is pretty much going to be pure tech. Okay. But before I get into that, someone did, and I think it was last week that I talked about this. I talked about about RETROSHARE, and I had discussed, if there was interest in me setting one up, to where we could kind of have a Patreon RETROSHARE community. RETROSHARE is a software, in a very real sense, it's software that is sort of an alternative internet. Sort of, it can work on a local area network, or it could work over, good old fashioned TCP/IP around the world, right? But it's really, really, really well developed, still developed, very cool software that I've been promoting on Sovereign Tech for a long, long, long time. Very decentralized. I mean, it's just, it's the real fucking deal. There's so much that you can do with it, from, video calling, VoIP, file transferring and all that stuff. And so I asked if there was any interest. I had a few people say that they'd be interested. Understand, we don't even, I don't even think I have 100 patrons, at this moment. So it would have been, but if it was 20, 30, 40, 50 people, if it was half the amount that I have, then yeah, I'd consider it. But anyway, so, a great patron, a great Sovereign Tech listener, someone who I know has been listening to Sovereign Tech forever, he actually set it up. He set one up himself, to where you can get access to. Well, here, I'll read what he had to say. He actually put this on the post. I guess this was last week's Q&A episode, Q&A number 42, episode 82 of Patreon. But anyway, it says, anyone joining me using the above RETROSHARE key will have access to all, and I put the RETROSHARE key, the public key that he mentions, I put that in the show notes for this episode, and maybe I'll leave them in the Patreon episodes from here on out. I'm going to figure out how I can, make that readily accessible to people. But he said, all of Babylon 5, so this is so if you set up RETROSHARE, you put in the public key, you will get, and you go to the file sharing part of RETROSHARE, you will get access to all this. All of Babylon 5, that's price of admission enough for me, and it's free. First 3 seasons of Silicon Valley, fantastic. my DVD collection, some classic rock, and this is all from the Sovereign Tech patron here, not me, and numerous torrented movies. I will continue to update this with whatever I can get my hands on through torrents/friends/Usenet. I know Brian doesn't need any more work on his hands, but I would like to offer this as a quote-unquote feature of being a patron, whether or not there is a huge interest at this time. I'm serious about this project and would be happy to take requests for files you would like to see. So there it is. There's the real deal. Someone already, and I love this when this happens, when a patron just says, no, God damn it, I'll do it. I understand that the Golden Stallion's a busy man, and I'll take up the charge. And so I'm really honored that this patron set that up. And I do trust this person personally, myself. If you're concerned about that, I actually do. This is somebody that I've met. So anyway, and he also offered for me to add on content, which holy cow, I mean, I have so much content. I will probably be adding content to this as well. I mean, this just makes it so easy for me that I'll make it happen. And I will be sharing my RetroShare key as well with people, even though I won't probably take part in the file sharing aspect of things, for a multitude of reasons. One of them being is that there's a lot of media uploading and stuff that already goes on in this household because, Stephanie and I do so much that, bandwidth is kind of a premium for us at the moment. So, yeah. So, but I'll get this to the Sovereign Tech patron, and I'm really honored by that. And like I said, it'll be in the show notes. You can find the public key to be able to get access to this stuff. And, Babylon 5, I mean, that's the most important thing I'd ever put anywhere, because I think that's one of the most important pieces of media ever made. First 3 seasons of Silicon Valley, I think that's fantastic. Boy, I'll tell you. Season 4 of Silicon Valley, of course, I've been watching it. I'm not really spoiling anything here. People already knew it had to do with decentralization. They announced that pretty much with the trailer for the show, so that's not a shock. The last episode, was that episode 3 or 4? I think maybe it was 4, or maybe it's 3, where they're hanging out in Peter Gregory. Was that his name, right? Peter Gregory? That was the guy, the actor that died from the first season, but anyway, he was the guy that originally, funded Pied Piper. Well, all right, now I would be spoiling it. Anyway, there's a scene where they're finding out where, the lead character is trying to figure out this decentralized internet. And he, the constant wording that he's using is like, yeah, we need an alternative internet, that blah, blah, blah. Now, that alone, I mean, that's something I've been talking about for years on Sovereign Tech. I don't think they took that from me. The funny thing is that at the same time that they're talking about, oh, we could do it this way, and everything, and then they start going on this whole, there's this little scene where they're saying, look, you gotta have a good woo. Just do a woo, and everybody's wooing. And for a moment, I'll be honest, not to have a sense of self-importance or anything, but I was thinking, do they listen to Sovereign Tech? Because the only guy in tech that really woo is me. I mean, really, I'm the guy. And so, talking about alternative internets and doing woo, I wondered. Anyway, I don't think I have that kind of reach. But hey, what the fuck? There it is. So anyway, yes. So RetroShare, there we go. Link the public key to get access to that is in the show notes, and you can all become a part of that community. And I will set that up very soon as well. So all right, wow, 13 minutes in. Let's get into some more questions here. Just pulling them up quick. So a couple of simple ones, and then we're going to get into one a little deeper, and then we got Album of the Week, and I'm actually going to do a movie review here at the end. So we got a lot to cover here quick. Also, I will be doing, I'll probably record it right after I'm done recording this. I'm going to be doing a Star Wars update, but I'm going to make it, there's so much to talk about, I'm not going to take up an entire Q&A with it, which is where I normally do my Star Wars updates. I'm just going to make a little separate episode. It's not going to be a thing that I do on the regular, but I'm going to do one because there's a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting things going on, and a lot of great content has been coming out lately for Star Wars. So, and I just want to talk about it a bit. But anyway, all right, so let's get into the questions here. First one, what Zcash wallet do you use? I think this would be an excellent Q&A question. Yes, I agree it is. So, okay, as far as, I mean, really the question is like what, there's not exactly like a singular great cross-platform Zcash wallet. There just isn't. Now, some people consider this to be a major flaw with Zcash. To some degree, I actually kind of like it because it allows, Zcash, you have such serious cryptography and groundbreaking cryptography really going on that, it's great that the dev team is working more on just making sure the cryptography and all the, the backend and everything is solid than having to worry about a very polished, UI. There's arguments that can go both ways on that, where people can say, well, without a polished UI, nobody's going to use it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, I have comments on that, but all right, let me take a second to talk about that. I've been reading, forget about, don't even think about the arguments with SegWit versus, extension blocks, which I talked about extension blocks maybe four Q&As back, or five, maybe it was five, or Lightning Network or Bitcoin Unlimited or anything like that. We already see kind of the fallout of what's happening there, which is very interesting because now Coinbase, I believe, is taking Litecoin. Coinbase now works with Litecoin because they're so terrified of the civil war going on in Bitcoin. And that's very interesting because, it was like 2014 when I said 2014 would be the year of Litecoin, that Litecoin wasn't going to go away and that it was going to be this big deal. Now, at the time, once 2015 rolled around, I was like, yeah, I think I was kind of wrong about Litecoin. But 2 years later, Litecoin is still very serious and it's hitting some all-time highs. Granted, seemingly every altcoin is hitting some kind of all-time highs. Like you have, NEM, the new economy movement, which I think it's XEM is their actual currency, is what they call it. NEM is, now I talked about the new economy movement, 2013, 2014. In fact, once they released the white paper, I talked about NEM. That was years ago. And I said, this one looks interesting. Now, apparently, I think it's unseated Dash. I could be wrong about that. So all these altcoins are hitting some crazy highs. And everybody's saying, look, it's a bubble. Even for Bitcoin, this is a bubble. This is a price bubble, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I get that. Now, the thing is that what's fueling, kind of this bubble? Well, as best as I can tell, and this is my opinion, okay, as best as I can tell, there's a lot of new investors involved. Okay, but then what excited all of these new investors? Now, I read, all the various Bitcoin and blockchain news and everything, and, you read about Ethereum is looking to work with the United Nations. Ripple's doing great in Japan. It's huge in Japan. All this, and just like all of these banks and governments around the world, or even the United Nations of all things, among others, are all getting, on board with cryptocurrencies and blockchain in general. And that would appear to be like that kind of news and the skyrocketing values of not just Bitcoin, but all of these, altcoins, cryptos, whatever, seem to be working in concert. Now, this concerns me for a few reasons. Because, and I get it. I see where this makes sense. So investors are hearing this news and there's investor confidence because governments and banks, institutions that have been around for hundreds, if not, however long, of years, are jumping on board with this stuff. And so now investors are like, oh, okay, so this is safe for me to get into. And as soon as there's more public announcements of this stuff, it's going to go to the moon, right? And all that other bullshit. Now, my overarching problem with that is that, okay, so clearly blockchain is just bolstering the system. Like it's bolstering the status quo. It's not really, and it doesn't have to. Like we were just talking about Zcash. Like Zcash is one, because you read all these stories and nobody's talking about Zcash. Why? Because why would governments or banks want anonymous cryptocurrencies, right? So you're always going to have, there's always going to be System D or, the shadow economy and all this, black markets, which, I fully support black markets. I'm a total black marketeer. And, they're going to need currencies. And for a while it was Bitcoin, seemingly that's changing a bit. I get all of this. Okay. But, kind of the concern here is that, well, yeah, some people are saying that this bubble is going to eventually pop, with all these altcoins. There's going to be this huge pop. But the funny thing is that, the purpose of a lot of blockchain technology in general, at least the original way that it was being sold and being developed for, was to get rid of middlemen. The thing is that a lot of this investor confidence is based upon the fact that middlemen are now using blockchains and all this different stuff, right? So it's like, wait a minute. Are we going to get rid of the middlemen, or are the investors going to be like, oh, you're working with the middlemen? Okay, now we'll give you money. Like, where are the incentives? Again, there's obviously incentives. There's always going to be the shadow economy. There's always going to be black markets, and they're going to need things, like private, privacy-oriented, cryptocurrencies, Monero, whatever else, okay? I'm not saying those things are being developed for that, but that's definitely where they're going to end up getting used. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And so the whole, I remember talking about the same thing years ago, because you saw the direction. You saw the direction that all these people, were looking to work with governments. And it's so fucking annoying, that's where the incentives are and where people are going. And it's the status flypaper, folks. Like, you really don't change the system from the inside. Okay, you just don't. In fact, there's who's also a Sovereign Tech sponsor, the great podcast, Resist the Empire podcast, which is the Libertarian Star Wars podcast. They do all these memes, and they're so good. Like, they did one the other day where it showed, it was from Return of the Jedi, and it had, it had a picture of everybody on Home One, right? Luke, Leia, Han, Lando, Admiral Akbar, all the rebels. And they're like, don't like the Empire? Join the Empire and change it from the inside. And it's hilarious because, of course, that logic doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Don't work with these people because you're just going to get stuck in the system like everybody else does. You build the fuck outside of it and build outside of it hard. That shit just drives me, that drives me nuts when I read this stuff. Like, if I was Ethereum and the United Nations came knocking on my door, I'd say, well, this is open source technology. You could try and use it, but don't call us. We're not going to help you with anything. Because I thought Vitalik was some kind of voluntarist or some kind of, anarchist or something. I guess not. Whatever. Fuck. Just develop and don't give a shit about, what did I say earlier about principles, right? Well, my principles are inconvenient right now. I'll help out the United Nations. Oh, man. Anyway, I could go on about that. Look, I'm still I am so bullish. I am still so supportive of, Bitcoin, blockchains, and, the idea in general. I don't think it needs to take over everything. It doesn't need to replace everything. Big iron is always going to be a part of life. As long as there's corporations and other shit. Look, they just are. Okay? But, it's just there's things that go on. There's motions, there's directions that the boat goes. And I just hate the fact that it's heading towards an iceberg and they know it. But there you go. So, okay, back to the question. What Zcash wallet do I use? So, all right. It depends what operating system you're talking about. As far as, if you're talking about Windows, which I know the bulk of Sovereign Tech listeners are actually are Windows users. So that's relevant for me to bring up. I do on Windows, I use Zcash for Win, and I'll put a link in the show notes, in the appendix of the show notes for this episode, where it says Zcash. It's just Zcash for the number 4 WIN.com. So Zcash for Win, they do the guy who's David Mercer is kind of the lead developer for that. And he's a guy that just does it pure out of passion. And I love that. And I think that's so cool. And I think they're the same team that does Zcash for Mac, which is, Zcash number 4 Mac, So if I used an Apple computer, which I don't, but if I did, I would use Zcash for Mac. I am very impressed. I haven't had any errors with Zcash for Win. It's been rock solid. It updates very nicely. I mean, you have to do it a little bit manually, but like anytime a new version of the backend client for Zcash comes out, I think they're on 1.0.8.1 or something like that right now. But they update it very quickly. Like within the next couple days, usually you can download a new version of the client. So you have so what I do when a new version of the client comes out, I don't delete my wallet file, but I delete the rest of the blockchain and the rest of the files within my Zcash for Win folder. This is where it gets manual, and then I just I go through the install process for the new version of Zcash for Win. A little bit of the pain in the ass, but it works so well. I mean, it works really, really good. The same developer, David Mercer, he also just does where it's just the raw GUI client, which is a lot easier to update, but obviously as far as using is nowhere near as pretty. So yeah, I'd use, if it's Apple or if it's Windows, I would use Zcash for Win for Windows or Zcash for Mac Now, when I'm on a Linux machine, I just use the raw CLI client. Just the command line. That's it. I just use that and I do the business. With that, I don't put any GUI over it. I just use the thing. I just use the repository straight from Zcash. And that's it when I'm on a Linux machine. Now, there is Jack's Wallet, okay, which gives you, that has mobile wallets for Android and iOS and everything. And it even they have their wallet for Chrome, right? So you can have it on your desktop, and they have an independent Jack's Wallet. Jack's Wallet is such a nice wallet. They have it for whatever operating system you've got. You can get Jack's Wallet. The thing is that Jack's Wallet it doesn't allow for shielded transactions of Zcash. It only allows for transparent. And that's kind of fine, and that could be handy. So if you really needed like a mobile version to use, it's kind of the only one, kind of. So I would use Jack's Wallet, but understand that you can't do the actual, good old-fashioned, or not, it's not old-fashioned, but you can't do the zero knowledge proof. You can't do the encrypted transfer of Zcash with that. You can't do the shielded, addresses and shielded transactions. You can only do transparent. So, keep that in mind as far as that goes. But with Zcash for Win and Zcash for Mac, both of those can do shielded and do it very well. And so to do a shielded transaction, your computer has to have at least 4 gig of RAM. I don't think that's changed to where they've gotten that down. That's one of the things I really hope that they get down. So, I mean, maybe by the time they could actually get that requirement down of needing 4 gig of RAM, maybe it won't matter. Maybe the average, it's already kind of to the point where the average computer, I think, has 4 gig of RAM. Hell, the average smartphone has 4 gig of RAM now. Not the average, but the average one being pushed out to you, these days. I remember just a year or two ago where 4 gig of RAM was fucking unheard of, on a smartphone. Now it's order of the day, and there's already ones that are 6 and 8 gig of RAM coming out. So, but we're not talking about smartphones here. Zcash is mainly, for desktop at the moment. So yeah, those are my recommendations. Like I say, link will be in the show notes for those. And I have had no issues, especially with Zcash for Win. No problem at all. As far as using the command line client for Linux, on Ubuntu in particular, I've had zero issues with that as well, and it's all worked very, very nicely. I've gotten donations in Zcash, and I'm honored by that. In fact, if you want to donate with Zcash, when you go to the Patreon page, both my shielded and transparent address are both there to donate with Zcash, and I'm honored that people have already done so. Some people have done so in very nice amounts as well, and I really appreciate that. It's just great to have my work be believed in, of course. All right, there we go with that. Let's see. Let's go on to the next. How are we doing on time here? Because, boy, I want to get through a lot. All right, 30 minutes in. Not bad. Okay, so the next question. This is a nice follow-up, because if you are going to use Zcash, maybe you just want to use the raw client, from Zcash themselves. that, again, it's just command line interface, but it's pretty nice. They do some nice ASCII art and everything. It's pretty cool. But here we go. I'll get to the question here. I'm not sure if you've answered this question before, but what is the best Linux distribution that you would recommend to a newcomer coming from Windows? Okay, so the easy answer, especially if you're coming from Windows, the easy answer that a lot of people will come out with is Linux Mint. Because Mint looks a lot like Windows when you use it, and it has a lot of really nice features and pre-installed software. Understand that with Linux Mint, it is not 100% open source, but granted, a lot of the more popular versions of Linux aren't exactly 100% open source either. Maybe they'll use proprietary drivers, for the video card or something like that. Ubuntu isn't exactly 100% open source. You have to, like, the first place you'd find 100% open source and that real open source, like, kind of ethos would be Fedora, and which Fedora is, okay. So I used Fedora. That's probably the version of Linux I've used the longest. Like, I used it forever. I mean, the first time I used Linux, I used Slack. I used Slackware, not Slack, the instant messenger. But I used, I used Slack, Slackware Linux, and that was, you can still use Slackware. I mean, it's still a thing out there, but that is definitely that's for a Linux. You'd want to use Ubuntu first. If you've never used Linux before, don't run to Slackware, even though in many ways, it's one of the more pure forms of Linux, that's available out there. So if you're coming from Windows, a lot of people say, yeah, jump on Mint. I mean, I think using Linux Mint is still better than using Windows as far as like security goes, and things like this. I mean, there's a definite advantage over using Linux Mint than Windows. I think Ubuntu's to the point, and especially with Ubuntu going back to having GNOME instead of using the Unity user interface. And this is the thing with Linux to understand, is that there's a bunch of different user interfaces. So you kind of get to choose like which way you like it. And as far as user interface, I mean, like, what does your desktop look like? I mean, you really get to change the entire way that operates, which is one of the nicer things, really, about Linux. But really, if you're coming from Windows, I recommend Ubuntu straight out of the gate. I mean, Linux Mint is nice, but just get the raw version of Ubuntu, because a lot of the nice thing about Ubuntu. Okay, so now, all right. An interesting thing has happened in the past year with Linux, and it's called Snap, S-N-A-P. There are, and this has to do with software and apps, okay? One of the advantages to using Ubuntu was that Ubuntu was working very hard. The company that runs Ubuntu, Canonical, was working very hard on making installers for software, and they have their app store and everything. Like, they were just trying to make installing software and apps as easy as possible. Because on Windows, it's pretty easy. You download the exe, right? And away you go. Or now if you're used to using UWP or something, you just go to the Windows Store and away you go. Which, honestly, the Windows Store and like the Mac Store and all that, they're all copying what Linux had, because Linux has a software repository, that kind of makes that process a little simpler. But you have what's called .deb files as compared to, the good old tarballs, right? People that use Linux regularly know what I'm talking about here. But anyway, the nice thing about Ubuntu is that there was those .deb files that you could download from websites, and you could install the software just like you would on Windows when you're used to, double-clicking on an exe file, on .exe. So that's why one of the reasons I always recommended Ubuntu for a while. Fedora had that as well. Of course, they were .rpms, which I think is a superior package file. But regardless, now you have from website or from companies and whatever that make software for Linux, you have what are called Snap apps, and these are very much solving kind of the software package issue that Linux has had for its entire existence. Now, it's not an issue for people that know how to use Linux. It's an issue for people that are coming into Linux that maybe having deep dives so much, with whatever computer they were using before, or, in computers in general. So Snap apps are the same deal, where you can install it, and also not just where you can install it easily. And you can still install Snap apps through the command line terminal, or, through the terminal as well. But now Snap apps they'll auto update in the background. And in fact, they can, if there's a problem with the auto update, it can do the rollback. All things that were for a time very unique to Windows and Mac to some, Mac OS to some degree. So this is, Snap apps, it's kind of a newer thing. Some people, for the reasons that they use Linux, may not like Snap apps because maybe they don't like that idea of the auto update feature, right? Because what could get auto updated to you? Could it be, what's the story here? But there's ways you can control some of that. But anyway, Snap apps is one of those things I think that, looking back, say maybe 2-3 years from now or 5 years from now, is going to be what really made Linux finally hit the mainstream. And people say that every year, that this is the year of Linux and all stuff. I'm not going to make that claim. I'm just saying that if and when, Linux does become, the operating system du jour, Snap apps are going to be a huge part of why that is, because people will be getting that experience that they're used to on mobile and on other, and on Windows and Mac OS. So talking about this longer than I expected. So if you are coming from Windows, like I said, I recommend just going with straight Ubuntu. You could try Linux Mint, which is Ubuntu based. Actually, it just has a different GUI and some modifications, and they put in some closed source shit. But I would really get used to Ubuntu. And the reason I say that is that even more so than I think Linux Mint, Ubuntu has such a great knowledge base and community that you can learn very quickly, and your Google searches or your DuckDuckGo searches will yield fruit on how to do what you're trying to do very quickly, in my opinion, and very efficiently. So that's the main draw with Ubuntu. And that's always been, really, that point right there about the community has always been one of the more important aspects of Ubuntu, and why, because this is the same answer I would have given you years ago. If you asked me this 5 years ago when Sovereign Tech started, this is kind of the same answer I'd give you. Even though I like Fedora better for a lot of reasons, Fedora just doesn't have that knowledge base. It doesn't have that community that can just help you get shit, get you getting your shit done, as soon as possible. So yeah, I recommend Ubuntu. If you are, now, that's not, understand that this question was, what's the best Linux for starting off when you're coming off of Windows? That's not what's the best version of Linux overall, what's the best version of Linux for privacy, blah, blah, blah. That's not what the question was asking. Okay, so because a lot of people are going to instance, what about Qubes OS? I know. Okay, I believe me. I'm the golden stallion. I know. All right. Qubes OS is great. That's QUBES OS. That's one of the premier as far as security, privacy, and all that, because everything gets sandboxed. Look, yep, that's great. That is top notch, and you want to get to the point maybe to where you can use Qubes OS. But understand that Qubes OS comes with a couple of things. One is that you have to have the hardware that can handle what Qubes OS does as far as virtual machines and all that. And then, the setup process is still something, that's being worked on. But the woman that developed the best version of Linux, the most private and secure version of Linux in the world, is a woman. She's working on it. And once Edward Snowden said he recommended Qubes OS across the board, certainly a lot of other people have joined in to help with developing it. But that's a very exciting version, of course, that I recommend, honestly, without reservation. So, in fact, there was the Purism line of laptops, and even the Libre Boots, the T500s or T4, whatever model they're pushing out there from the Ministry of Freedom. All of their hardware works with Qubes OS, and you can get it pre-installed. If you want to, buy from Purism, there's some issues. Libre Boot, I don't mind recommending at all. But Purism, that's another story. I'm not going to go into that. Maybe I'll get into that with our guests this week on Sovereign Tech. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, start off with Ubuntu. Just get used to Ubuntu because Ubuntu is going to be around for a long time. And all of the other versions, or a lot of the other versions that people recommend as far as operating systems go, a lot of them are based off of Ubuntu. Now, granted, Ubuntu is based off of Debian. I know that. But yeah, go check out Ubuntu. And there's great articles out there where, if you go to a search engine and just type in set up Ubuntu for privacy, there's great articles that talk step by step how to enhance your security and privacy on Ubuntu itself. Again, that speaks of that whole community, that so many people use it that it's very easy to find the information to get done what you want to get done. So, all right, that's my recommendation on that. All right, 40 minutes in, let's get to another question here. Woo. This is a good one. This actually has to do with tablets. I like this. Okay. I just dusted off my Kindle Fire HD with a nice update from Amazon. I noticed that this update came with Alexa on my Kindle tablet. It seems to be just an app form. Do I have to worry about this thing like all other Internet of Things devices? I've tried to uninstall this app to no success. Help. Yes, pretty much anything Amazon puts out there, except for their e-readers like the Paperwhite and the Voyage and the Oasis. Pretty much everything has Alexa on it now, and you cannot get rid of Alexa. Like, it's baked in pretty much to the operating system or to whatever app they needed to attach it to, and it's an app that you can't get rid of. So unless you're going to, install like Lineage OS or something onto a Kindle tablet, which I don't know if anyone's even done that with the new versions of Lineage OS. Some people were successful with getting CyanogenMod onto them, which Lineage OS is just the new name for CyanogenMod. But anyway, that's your only hope. Like that's the only thing you could do. Now, is Alexa going to be always listening? Yeah, I think off and on it's gonna turn on, and it is a little bit concerning. You can't, Fire OS, which is Amazon's version of Android, does not offer the feature like Android Marshmallow and Android Nougat and all the other ones offer, where you could, and again, it says that you can that you turned off the microphone in the software, but you don't fucking know that it did that. Not really. As far as I know, I think it was a Fire OS 5 they're up to. You can't. There isn't the ability to just like turn off the microphone. So yeah, Alexa could be listening at points. If you're concerned about your tablet listening to you, yeah, it's gonna. That's it. Alexa's a part of it, and Alexa is really, that's Amazon's real operating system now. That's their real bread and butter. Everything is Alexa, Alexa, Alexa. And if I'm setting off people's devices, I don't feel bad for you at all. So now, this gets into interesting places because, like I said, I think this question was asked before I talked about this. Was it last week? It was actually in episode 224. Or, no, it was episode 223, where I talked about the Amazon Look, which is the new, or the Echo Look, which is the new Amazon Echo that has a camera on it, like that's a movable camera and everything. And of course still has the 7 microphones in it, whatever. When I was talking about that, I said I wouldn't be surprised if the Kindle tablets, the Fire tablets, end up going away. Like, I don't think the e-readers will ever go away, but I think the tablets will, in the near future. There seems to be more evidence for that happening as well. Because this week there was this I did mention in episode 224, that there was a touchscreen version of the Amazon Echo coming out. And I said at the time, when I mentioned it at the beginning of the episode, which Stephanie and I were trying to get to a big topic. So I was kind of running through that. I was like, I'm not exactly sure what their play is here, but I've been thinking about it, ruminating on it, and now I understand what's going on. Like what is the purpose of having, because now, the Echo, there's 3 different types of Echoes now. And you'd think that, initially I would think that coming out with an Echo that, the one with the camera, like, okay, I kind of got it, but then to come out with another one and one with the touchscreen, one that seems to stand in contrast to that notion of zero UI, of your voice just controls everything and you have no actual like real control with your hands or whatever. Everything gets done by voice and, the permission slips are handed out by Amazon themselves and then, of course, by the NSA, blah, blah. All right. But the conclusion I've come to and what I think Amazon's strategy is, and this kind of plays off of the fact that your tablet now has Alexa on it, is that they want Alexa to take the different shapes it needs to where it's quote unquote needed. Now, of course, I would tell you, with sovereign tech zone ethos that you don't want Alexa, right? You don't want this shit around you. Okay. But I think what they did is that, okay, so the Amazon Echo can go in whatever random room you need it. The Amazon Look, that's the one with the camera, or I'm sorry, not the Amazon, the Echo Look. Okay. Yeah. The Amazon Echo can go whatever room you need it. The Echo Look will go in the bedroom, right? Because it's supposed to be for, it's centered around fashion, it's supposed to be for when you get dressed and everything. So that'll sit in the bedroom. Then you have the Echo Show, which is what it's called. That's the name of the one that has a touchscreen on it. The Echo Show will be probably in the kitchen, okay, which is an area where the Echo has been wildly successful. Okay, like that part of the house is where that has been really successful. And then you have the Echo Dot, right? Is it the Dot that can go, that's portable? So then you can take the Echo Dot with you wherever you happen to go, put it in somewhere at work or something. So they're really, and it would seem kind of counterintuitive because a lot of people have used this argument against the Amazon Echo since the Amazon Echo originally came out, is that why would you buy a separate canister device like the Amazon Echo that can do all this when your smartphone in your pocket can just do this and it's with you everywhere? And it's a fair argument to make, but people are buying into the Echo ecosystem regardless. They're really excited about this, kind of this voice interactivity that people have. They're just going to put Alexa wherever it can go. And then, if you have the Fire TV or the Fire Stick, right, that has Alexa baked into it, just like your recent Fire tablet update, baked it into it. That will put Alexa in the living room. So do you see what I'm saying? Is that they're figuring, what I think what's happening here is Amazon is figuring out how can we get Alexa, like, it's multiple devices, but make the devices so compelling in the various rooms of your house that they need to be, that you will buy that many Echoes and you will put whatever Echo, purpose-built Echo for that room that, and you'll put it there and you'll have Alexa there at all times. Of course, you're putting microphones all across your house or cameras all over your house and you're constantly being spied upon. But that's the plan. And it's pretty fucking insidious and brilliant. And I say that, I think it's a malicious brilliance. Okay. Understand I'm not really happy about this, even though I'm complimentary. So I think that's what's going on. I think what Amazon's going to end up doing, like I said, I still think they're going to end up canceling, their Fire tablet line, and they're going to just make it kind of already is there, where you could have the Alexa app, right on your smartphone. And I think that's really the plan, is that they'll have Alexa. Alexa's going to be such a part of your house that, yeah, okay, well, the smartphone in your pocket could do all of these wonderful things, but instead it's going to become just another conduit for Alexa. And because your smartphone can't really do everything that these like the Echo Look, and maybe it could do a lot of what the Echo Show can do, because the Echo Show is going to be able to like activate YouTube and a lot of different other things. But it really won't be the same. Like, and this is really interesting that Amazon seems to, we'll see if these things sell. We don't know about the Look or the Show, how well they're going to sell, but they seem to be pointing in the direction that, they're getting rid of the Swiss Army knife in your pocket, and the Swiss Army knife being, your smartphone. And it seems to be a pretty brilliant move. It's funny, but it appears that the Amazon phone, right, the Fire phone, that failing might be the best thing that ever happened to Amazon. because now they skipped an entire category. And I mean, everybody's copying them. Harman Kardon announced, was it Microsoft Build today? I'm recording this on Wednesday, May 10th. Boy, my birthday's in 2 days. May 12th, I'm going to be 36. Holy fuck. Anyway, sorry. But the Amazon, where was I? Oh yeah, Harman Kardon. So at Microsoft Build today, Harman Kardon and I think HP and some others announced that they're going to come out with what are effectively Amazon Echoes, but they're going to have Cortana built into them. And Microsoft, I think they knew kind of concurrentently. I don't think they understood the form factor of the Amazon Echo, but I think they got the basic principle that the real operating system isn't Windows. The real device maybe isn't even the phone, or it isn't, even the computer perhaps. That the real winner, the real piece of software, the real operating system, and I said this, 2 years ago on Sovereign, is Cortana. That Cortana is really what it's all about. And so building Windows 10 to work on every fucking device from a refrigerator to a Raspberry Pi to now, a Harman Kardon, fucking speaker or whatever, to have it all over the place is to have Cortana all over the place. And that's what really matters. And so Amazon and Microsoft, really Microsoft's the only competition Amazon has, because Google's not. Well, there's a recent write-up about what's happening with the OS Fuchsia, which we talked about in Sovereign Tech when they first announced it. That was maybe 2 years ago as well, or a year ago. It's a real-time operating system. And anyway, I think they're realizing what Microsoft and Amazon are doing and how they're really competing in the space. And Google's going to try and catch up, but they are playing catch-up right now. And Apple, well, I mean, they're behind seemingly on everything. Their new iPhone's going to have to be something fucking amazing. Otherwise, I think that company is in some very, very serious trouble. So yeah, to reiterate the answer to the very basic question that you asked, is it a problem that my Fire tablet now has Alexa and you can't get rid of it? Yeah, if you're concerned about it listening to you, it's gonna. It's just gonna, folks. So there you go. Okay, so I got to all those. Let's get into. How about I do album of the week first, and then I will get into we'll get into a review. We're 50 minutes, so looking good. I don't like these to be over an hour. If you're new to Patreon, just to let you know. I mean, sometimes they end up being an hour and a half, but I really like to keep them under an hour or around an hour with these Q&As. So, all right, album of the week. This is kind of a classic here. I mean, well, no, this is not a classic. Normally, I'm telling you about something from some 80s band or even some 70s band, some kind of classic rock, hard rock, heavy metal, something like that. This is definitely metal, but it's a little more modern. It's a band that actually started in 2002, and they're from the Northeast. They're from Massachusetts. I love my Northeastern bands or East Coast bands, whatever. Maybe not necessarily Northeastern, but my East Coast bands, like Overkill, all those, Bon Jovi, the whole list. And it's Rev Theory. Originally they were Revelation Theory, but then they changed it to Rev Theory. And they're not, technically their first album was Truth is Currency. That's when they were called Revelation Theory. I don't recommend that album at all. It came out in 2005. But their album, I guess technically their second album, though maybe their first, depends how you want to list it off. It came out in 2008, and it's Light It Up is the name of the album. And this album, like I said, this is a more modern band for me. I don't talk about bands from the aughts very often. And they're still around. They came out with an album in 2011 called Justice. They came out with one last year in 2016 called The Revelation. They've had a few EPs here and there. But Light It Up is just a badass fucking album. This is, I want to consider it a first album. I know they were originally called Revelation Theory and they had Truth is Currency, but this is an opening album, and it's an opening opus. It is so good, and it's not, this isn't like hair metal music of any kind. I mean, this is aughts. What do you call that? do you call it butt rock? I don't know, whatever the fuck the terms are for the aughts. I don't know where you start classifying things, but I mean, it has a modern sound. Okay. I mean, and they got some radio play. Their main song off of it isn't even the best song off the album. Their main song was the title track, Light It Up, which is track 3 on the album. It's a great song. It's a hard rocker. It's really, really good. I mean, there's barely a bad song on this album, but the song that really won me over was the first track, which is Hell Yeah. Great name for a song. Hell Yeah. And there's a music video for that. There's a music video for Light It Up and Hell Yeah. Both the music videos are sexy as hell. The music video for Light It Up is like a woman's fight club. Really sexy. The music video for Hell Yeah is awesome. It actually has Ashley Massaro in it, who was a diva, a WWE diva, wrestling. She was a female wrestler back at the time, and I mean, just ridiculously sexy. And she's in that, and it just sells it. It's so good. But I mean, that's like a really intense, like, real fist pumping song. Hell Yeah. I mean, it's great. None of the other tracks on the album really sound like Hell Yeah. But that is such a great song. It's worth the album alone. But the second track, Favorite Disease, is really good. Light It Up is a great song. It gets a little slower with, I think, the track 4, which is Broken Bones. There's another song on there, Wanted Man, that's really good. Far From Over. I mean, like, it's not track for track, but it's damn near. It's a great album. A lot of people don't know about it, or they've forgotten about it. But Rev Theory's still out there. They still do numbers. They still sell albums. I have not been impressed. Again, they've really only had three main albums. They had Justice, which came out in 2011, and then they had The Revelation, which came out in 2016. Neither of those later 2 albums really hooked me the way Light It Up did. And this is something that happens with bands. I've talked about this before, especially with metal bands, where you get your, you get your first album. Your first album is usually it's the summation of like everything you've thought about musically your whole life. And so often a first album is really good. And then your sophomore album, that's where things get tough, because then you got to follow that up, and you're not putting in all of that angst that you've had your whole life as a musician, right? So second albums can be hard. If a band comes out with a great second album or a great third album or something, you've got a great band on your hands, because that's hard. For example, a lot of people talk about a band that I just love, Evanescence, right? This is a great example here, and kind of a similar time frame, to when Rev Theory was around, and somewhat of a similar sound. So Evanescence, you have, I mean, it's not technically their first album, but really it's their first album, Fallen, right? Bring Me to Life, all those songs, Tourniquet. I mean, you just go down the fucking list. That is a track for track fucking album. My Immortal, blah, blah. Okay, that is a track for track album. Every song on that album is amazing. Like, literally amazing. You could listen. In fact, I remember when Fallen came out by Evanescence, my buddy and I, my best friend at the time, who I called Spock, that wasn't his real name, but that's since high school, it's what I called him. I mean, there was a point where we were driving around, CDs were still a thing at the time, and like that CD never left his deck in his car, and we just keep listening to it, and we just keep going through it. I mean, like it was that good. It was, however many songs, and all of them were fucking great. I mean, now My Immortal and Bring Me to Life, like, for a lot of people, they've overheard them and they don't care anymore. I still think they're, My Immortal I don't care so much about, but Bring Me to Life, I still get it, like, I appreciate the badassery of that song, as cheesy as it is. But, so you had that great album, I mean, just that amazing album with Fallen, and what was the Open Door? Was that the second album? Whatever. The second album that had... what is it? Don't Lie to Me? Yeah, Call Me When You're Sober. That's what it was called. I couldn't think of it. But yeah, the album's The Open Door. And it was Call Me When You're Sober. Like, that was really the only hit off that album. I mean, that album sold gangbusters. And I think it genuinely had other great songs on it. 13 tracks. I mean, there had to be something else good on there, right? But there really, there was. But it didn't really, like Sweet Sacrifice that it opened up with, I thought that was great. Lithium was good. But I mean, it wasn't Fallen. Like, I mean, it just was not that album at all. Like, it didn't even compare. And then they had their self-titled album come out a few years later. And that had the Do What You Want, right? That was the big track off of that. But it was only one song. You know, the rest of the album was as to where Fallen, you know, like every single fucking song was great. And so this happens with bands where it's very tough to follow up like that first album. And I think the same is true for Rev Theory, where I don't think Justice, was that great of an album, and I don't think their 2016 album was that great either. And it's a shame because like I was really hopeful. I was like, oh yeah, these guys are going to do it. This is such a great new band. Like I was kind of hoping they'd be like another Hinder, where Hinder just got better with every album until Hinder's 2015 album, which is pure shit when they ditched their lead singer. But anyway, Rev Theory, Light It Up, album of the week, absolutely. I definitely recommend that album. So good, so hard hitting, right from the first track. It just takes your, knocks your socks off with Hell Yeah. And then Favorite Disease is great, and then it goes into Light It Up, the title track, and that's so good. Wanted Man. I mean, there just lots of great songs on there. Okay, so now, I could probably just end it there, but I'm not going to. Because really, I could do this as an entirely separate episode, but I'm not gonna. So just the other night I went and saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. The lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I, we went and saw it. Had a great time. It was, I'll just say it right out, it was a great movie. Like, I mean, it was a very, very good movie. Not without flaws, but it was a really good flick. Now, if you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Volume 1, or the first one, I mean, just stop. Press stop. Go fucking watch it. Do whatever you got to do to go see that, to see that movie. Because the first one is an amazing little film. Total shocker. Like, nobody knew that movie was coming. Most people had never even heard of heard of Guardians of the Galaxy from Marvel, which it is based off of the Marvel comic book, or at least the second generation Marvel comic book, which we'll talk about that more in a second. So the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I loved it. I think it might be the best Marvel movie. Maybe one of the Iron Mans beat it, but like the main thing that sold me, and it was one of the things I was kind of disappointed not to see in Volume 2. So spoiler alerts, folks, spoiler alerts. If you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I'm going to tell you things that happen in it. So spoiler alerts, stop it if you want to now. Go to the, this movie's worth putting money down. So, go see it. But in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, or in the first one, you had, retroactively it'll be called Volume 1. In the first one, the Nova Corps was there, and I just remember sitting in the theater, and I literally had tears coming out of my eyes. Because to see the Nova Corps, like, that was nuts. The thing that, I did a few episodes, and I have to do more in the series. I did a comic book top 8s for Patreon, where I did for Marvel and DC. I actually did 2 parts for Marvel and DC so far. And one of the points I made, one of the reasons that I said that I felt DC is actually better than Marvel, is because DC has such a strong science fiction component to it, that it's not just all superheroes, because you have, Green Lantern's still a superhero, but like, you really, really get into, more of the universe, like exploring the universe, and not everything's just fucking happening on Earth. And part of the reason I think that's able to happen with DC is because you're not talking about New York City or, whatever major city. A lot of people think that Marvel, being based in actual places on Earth, like New York City or, wherever they happen to be, that's somehow superior. I totally disagree, because I think having fake cities in DC, like Metropolis, Coast City, Gotham and all that, even though they're based off of real cities, allows for a lot more narrative control and a lot more interesting aspects to occur. So, and part of that is, I think, really is a lot of this more science fiction component that, like the Legionnaires or Dark Stars, which is one of my favorites in the 80s, or the Green Lantern Corps or something like that. Really, really allows for. I mean, and also, just by nature, DC is far more science fiction. I mean, the number one character, I mean, you could argue whether or not Batman or or Superman, who's bigger. I think Batman by the metrics is probably the bigger character now, but for a while I think Superman's more like readily recognized as the most recognized, comic book character in the world. Superman himself is an alien, from a destroyed planet. There's so much like physics and science fiction just around that alone that, the main characters in Marvel are all very human. Even if they have interactions with the power cosmic or something like the Fantastic Four, they're all very human. Captain America is just, human with the super serum, right? Super soldier serum and, all of this. So DC lends itself to a much more science fiction edge that I love, and why one of the many reasons I think DC is superior to Marvel. But regardless, Marvel did finally, and really it started with Star Wars, which actually kicked off a lot of science fiction in the mainstream, with as far as TV and as far as movies go. Certainly science fiction was doing just fine as far as novels, and books and everything. But with Star Wars, suddenly Marvel started to take notice. Hey, we got to start doing shit in space, and not just with the Fantastic Four. We need to be doing this across the board. And so, Marvel does have a science fiction component. The Silver Surfer is one of my favorite Marvel characters. I talked about that in the comic book top 8s. Adam Warlock, all these different stuff. But yeah, it was never as central to the story, it seemed, as it is with DC. But anyway, that's changing now because the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie was such a huge hit that now finally Marvel's starting to treat its science fiction components with respect. One of the major science fiction components, and it was totally a copy of the Green Lantern Corps. And most people at Marvel will admit that to you, that Nova and the character of Nova and the Nova Corps are just cheap knockoffs of the Green Lantern Corps. But Nova kind of came into his own as a really cool character. Had a great look, great uniform, all that stuff. Certainly cooler than Green Lantern. Not that I have any problem with how Green Lantern looks. And to see the Nova Corps in action, was amazing. That was really, really cool. And made Guardians of the Galaxy, the first movie, very special to me. Unfortunately, they're not in the second movie. There it is. It's unfortunate. I'm not going to go over the whole plot of, it all has to do with the planet Ego and Ego being the father of Star-Lord and all this different stuff. I'm not really going to go into that. I'll pretty much tell you, like I said, I think it's a great movie. My problems with it come from being a fanboy. There's one problem that's not because of a fanboy, but my issues with it largely have to do with being a fanboy. So anyway, here we go. So I'm going to break it down a bit, what I liked about Guardians of the Galaxy, what I didn't. What I didn't like about it, so here's the biggest problem with the movie. The music. Other than the song Brandy by Looking Glass, the soundtrack for the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie was phenomenal. Was so good. So many great hooks. So many classics. It's one of the best albums you could buy. Is the soundtrack, not the score, but the soundtrack to, what do they call it, the Awesome Mix for the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Just incredible. Incredible. The most of the songs in the second one, I'm not saying they're bad songs, but they're not like the same hook. They're not the same, they're just not at the level. And, as the ones in the first movie. Come and Get Your Love, Fooled Around and Fell in Love. There's so many great songs from the first film. So that kind of sucked because I remember walking out of the first movie and I was singing every one of those songs, and I didn't find myself singing any of the songs walking out of the second Guardians of the Galaxy. I was really disappointed. Now I knew ahead of time that was the case because the soundtrack came out a month before the movie did, and I listened to it and I was like, wow, this kind of sucks. The only thing cool on it was that David Hasselhoff raps in it, and that was the nice thing about the movie is that they brought up that I love Dave. I'm genuinely a fan of David Hasselhoff's music. Not a new fact to Sovereign Tech listeners. I've run ads for Knight Rider for years on Sovereign Tech. I'm a huge David Hasselhoff fan. Okay, and it was really cool to have, either verbally or maybe even at one point physically, be a part of the film. That made it very special to me. So that was a huge positive. I love the fact that that Peter / Star-Lord. That he says when he talks about David Hasselhoff in the movie. He says that he's a singer and an actor, and I thought it was so great. Because the only other time I heard anybody mention about David Hasselhoff being a singer in a movie or, in some kind of media, mainstream medium is in America anyway. In Europe, everybody knows David Hasselhoff's a singer. He's like the Michael Jackson of Europe. Was Blade Trinity, where Ryan Reynolds' character says, when asking what kind of music he's into, he says, yeah, I'm more of a David Hasselhoff guy myself. And I was like, fuck yeah. I thought that was so cool. So to finally hear somebody else mention it, that was really exciting. And Hasselhoff does a little rap on the album and during the end credits and everything. And it's funny and it's nice. And anyway, so that was cool. But yeah, the music just wasn't there. Now, I could sympathize and I can guess that maybe Disney, that the record companies. So, okay, when the first Guardians of the Galaxy came out, nobody fucking knew what the Guardians of the Galaxy were. I mean, and that was a movie that ended up doing crazy numbers because there was so much word of mouth. All right. But, the Marvel faithful who love a science fiction component, obviously kicked off the movie, going to see it and everything. And then the word of mouth happened and became this huge deal. So when you go to the record companies, when Disney goes to the record companies and says, hey, okay, yeah, we'd like to use this song, this song, this song. And everybody's like, oh yeah, this is just some 70s cheese. We don't care. Go ahead and use it. You can practically use the song for free. Then Guardians of the Galaxy 1 becomes this huge movie. And so I could imagine that they went to maybe James Gunn, the director, kind of the mind behind the Guardians of the Galaxy films. He goes to, and I mean, I'm sure, Kevin Feige, kind of the, one of the main producers for Disney. I'm sure Feige, could just come out and say, and hand James Gunn a blank check, for Guardians of the Galaxy because the first movie was such a huge hit. But I imagine they went to those same record companies and the record companies said, no, we're going to charge you fucking top dollar for whatever song you want to use. And so I think they went for maybe some lesser known hits. I'm not saying these songs aren't big and that they weren't big and that they aren't classics. They are. But they're just not the same level as from the first one. And I'm just going to guess the reason being either it was just poor choice of songs or, the record companies were just charging way too much and they had to go with the ones that were maybe legally dubious and that they could purchase on the cheap. That's my guess. Anyway, as to where maybe one of the bigger songs on there would have been from, oh, fuck. Now I'm trying to remember. The people that did Silver Springs. That's so bad. Anyway, one of the major songs on there, I can't believe. Oh, Fleetwood Mac, fucking shit. One of their songs on there, they're still alive, and so and they still tour. So I imagine it was they were probably like, oh yeah, no, you can use our song because we want the press. Just where every other band, the songs that they use, I mean they're gone. These people are either dead or they're in nursing homes. Unfortunately, I say that with respect. But anyway, so yeah, that was the music that really, because that was one of the big selling points of the first one, and I was very disappointed in that. But again, the story overall, acting, everything, all that stuff is great. Gamora's great. I thought that Drax, played by Dave Bautista, who I'm a huge fan of Dave Bautista back when he was a wrestler in WWE as well. He was in Evolution with Triple H and Ric Flair, and and Randy Orton and all that. Love Dave Bautista. He was great. I felt like he stole the show, but at the same time, he was a weak element, and I'll explain this. So I thought he stole the show because, just the truth bombs that he was dropping through the whole film, I thought were amazing. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. But to say what the problem is, part of the problem is you have Drax the Destroyer, and other than the opening of the film, he didn't really do a whole lot of destroying. They didn't really let him loose. There was a cool point where he's hanging out of the spaceship and everything and doing his business, but by and large you didn't really get to see him in action. But the things he was saying were so cool. In fact, there's one, and I shared it on social media, where he said and the quote is, it's like, you Earthers have hangups. And they were talking about, there's this point where he's talking to Ego, which is, wow, why am I having such a hard time with names today? So Kurt Russell's character, Ego, which is the planet, which I'll talk about that more in a second. Like there's a point where they're talking to him and it's so funny because Drax is like, did you make a penis? You know, because they're talking about how he birthed, Chris Pratt's character, that being Star-Lord / Peter Quill. And Peter's like, what do you don't ask him about that. That's terrible. It's supposed to be like this very comedic moment. And Drax says, what are you talking about? My parents talked about theirs every winter solstice. It was a beautiful story. It's like, giving birth to me is a beautiful thing. And, and how all that goes. And I was kind of like, yeah, you don't want to, like, I mean, me thinking about my parents stooping is not the most pleasant thought to me either. But thinking about it, I'm like, and that's where Drax says, boy, you Earthers have hangups. What's your problem, with with thinking about, your parents doing that sort of thing. But it was kind of right. It's like, the act of procreation, like, can be a very beautiful thing. And that we're so grossed out by a lot of this stuff. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying I totally agree with it. I'm just saying that I thought some of the points that Drax is bringing up, or like the point that he made about, beautiful people live in a lie, because, you never really know if somebody loves you or if they just, like you because you're so beautiful or something. It's where ugly people, when they're loved, they're really loved because they're loved for what's inside or something. And yeah, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I get all that. But some of the things Drax was saying was just, they were just philosophical hammers getting laid down. It was really, really fast, or stuff to at least think about, whether you agreed with them or not. And I'm not saying I agreed 100%, but I thought that was really clever philosophy getting dropped in an action, a quasi-kids action film. Yeah, okay, so Drax, there, great part of it. Obviously, Baby Groot was cute as hell. That I think that goes without saying. All the other characters were pretty cool. So, but let's get into kind of some of the other problems I had with it. And one of my main problems was Kurt Russell's ego himself. Ego is the living planet. Now, when I was growing up, okay, I'm not going to spend much more time on this. Bottom line is, it was a great movie. I'm getting into nuance here. Ego was this this planet effectively with a mustache and eyes. Like, it looked like the man on the moon, but it was literally a living planet. But it was just a planet. It didn't really have like a Kurt Russell-esque character that was the embodiment of the entire planet. It was just the fucking planet. And the planet didn't look, like in the comic books, Ego didn't look like that. Like, it was a very ugly planet. It didn't, look like heaven like it did in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So that was kind of weird for me. And that was the question a lot of people are asking. It's like, so how is Kurt Russell Ego? Because Ego is just a giant planet. And then they sort of did this thing where you find out that Ego is actually a Celestial. Now, that's a problem too, because Celestials, when I was growing up, we're talking Marvel in the 90s, and of course, even, decades before then. The Celestials was like a robot race. Was this omnipotent, robot race. It wasn't a human. It wasn't like really organic or anything. Like, it was just, and they were very mysterious. There wasn't much known about them. Now, in the late 90s, in 1999, when they came out with Earth X, that's where kind of the whole concept that Kurt Russell's ego in the movie Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is like, spreading his, kind of parts of him on every planet to help make that, that became a thing for the Celestials in Earth X. But before Earth X, which was sort of an alternative universe story for Marvel, before that, the Celestials were just these giant robots running around, around the universe, and nobody fucked with them because they could destroy anything, So that kind of messes with my head. Look, I get it. Kevin Feige and James Gunn and whoever else, they're not going to pay attention to, the canon that I grew up with and blah, blah, blah. And Marvel just keeps rebooting the canon every year anyway, it seems, in the comic books themselves, to say nothing of the movies. So I really shouldn't have the expectation that any of that shit's going to get paid attention to. And they're just going to make stuff up as they go along. And they did, but it was annoying because these are the things that I wanted answers to, and I thought the answers were a little cheap because they just retconned shit, and so I didn't dig that, the idea of Ego being a Celestial and all this other crap. I mean, again, before, Ego was literally just a fucking planet. It was like Unicron, but organic, Unicron from Transformers, the movie, the real Transformers movie from '85, animated. Don't even start talking to me about the fucking Michael Bay movies. So yeah, I just like, it's like you're going to introduce people to the Celestials, and you do that with Kurt fucking Russell. Like, so to understand how, like, why the Celestials were such a big deal, at least to me growing up, was they had in the 90s, early 90s, this would have been, trading cards were a big deal, baseball cards, all of that. Eventually, like when Magic the Gathering started and some of this other stuff, you ended up with where a lot of comic book companies were jumping on board with, with making trading cards as well. Not necessarily card games, even though eventually DC and Marvel would make their own CCG, right, customizable card game called Overpower, which was really great. It was a really cool game. Anyway, so Marvel at the time came out with this, with these cards that were, and DC had them too. I had both. But Marvel came out with these, and it was Series 3 in particular that I remember, where it was just cards that had art of the various characters. And at the time, the artistry at Marvel, with Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld and all those guys, was just top notch, the best it's ever been. And they would, the cards were pretty much just cards that either described like some kind of great battle or a tag team or a team or, whatever superhero, Hulk, Captain America, or some villains, Mephisto, Doctor Doom, whatever. Now, the fun thing is that with the character cards that they made, again, these were just trading cards. It wasn't a game. It wasn't like Overpower where it was designed as a game. With just the character cards, on the back of it, it would give you a description of the character, and then it would have like these meters, these lines, okay, where it would, like a graph, where it would say how powerful is this character. It's like what is their their mentality, their physicality, their mutant power, whatever, not mutant powers, but just like their power overall, their strength. Like it would have all of these different breakdowns of their abilities. And a game, and I don't think I was the only one that came up with this. I came up with it independently. There was no internet at the time to tell me about this, and it was in no magazine. A game that I devised with my friends at the time, again, we're talking like 91, 92, 93, something like that, was we'd make the deck of cards with all the character cards, and we would just kind of like lay out, like we'd each have a deck, and we'd lay out the card, and whoever had the best stats, that's the word I was looking for, whoever had the best stats for the character would win. Okay, like if you laid down Captain America, like if I laid down Captain America and my friend from their deck put down the Hulk would win, just based upon like, power and whatever else. And it was tons of fun. I loved playing that, and I'd play it all the time. And I ended up buying so many Series 3 Marvel cards that, that way, no matter, even if my friend that I was hanging out with didn't have them, he could use his deck. But the couple cards that you really wanted with that little game that I made, one was Mephisto, who is effectively Satan, and like was, all nines. Okay. The other card that you wanted was the Celestials, because their rating was literally off the chart. Like that's what it said on the back. It wasn't all nines or it wasn't tens. It said off the chart, and so no matter who you went up against, like as soon as somebody pulled the Celestials, I mean, it was over, so in my mind, I think of these characters as incredibly powerful. And so for the Celestials to like, to be, for their introduction into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to be Kurt Russell and Ego, yeah, I felt it felt cheapened. That's what we got. Now, interestingly, with the part where, speaking of the Celestials, with the part where Gamora and Nebula, her sister, are getting away from Ego, we almost got some tentacle porn there, didn't we? With Ego, with the Celestial, because he was wrapping the tentacles around him, and ooh. So yeah, that was kind of my major concerns with it. Now the end credit scene. There was 5 end credit scenes, which I thought was hilarious because when Stephanie and I went, I knew there was going to be 5 end credit scenes, and everybody's just walking out of the theater, and it's like, okay, fine, you can miss the rest of the fucking film. I mean, I would hope people would have learned by now that, with Marvel movies, they're going to use right to, after the credits, they're going to put a fucking scene. But nobody learned that lesson. So, one of the really cool characters in the movie was actually Sylvester Stallone, who was playing Starhawk. Even though, what did it call Sakaar, right? It was, I forget the planet name for Sakaar, but a lot of people don't know there was a Guardians of the Galaxy back in the 60s, or back in the 70s, that had nothing to do with Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, or Rocket Raccoon, or or Groot. And it was a really cool team. You got that team. In fact, Mainframe was voiced by Miley Cyrus in the movie. I don't think a lot of people knew that, but I thought that was kind of cool. So now Kevin Feige has said that they're not going to make a separate. I've heard two stories on this. There's one story where Disney said we're going to make Sylvester Stallone, as Starhawk, kind of lead film at some point. But then Kevin Feige said that no, we're just going to have the separate Guardians of the Galaxy team that might be part of the Guardians movies, either in Volume 3 or going on into the future or something. But that was cool. Starhawk is a really cool character, really wild, interesting character. And I imagine Stallone's take on it will be very different than the comic books, but that was still kind of cool to see. And Michelle Yeoh was there, and Ving Rhames and everything. I thought it was cool to kind of have those classic action stars rocking it, and to have Miley Cyrus's Mainframe. I think that's fine. So that was interesting to see that. To see that those characters, and they had a scene at the end during the end credits. The other interesting scene during the end credits was with the Sovereign, no relation to me, where you get Adam Warlock being created. Now here's a part that disappointed me again. I was like, oh shit, Adam Warlock? It's like, oh, of course they have to bring in Adam Warlock, because the next Avengers movie is going to be Infinity War, and Adam Warlock is one of the central characters of Infinity War. But Kevin Feige came out and said, oh no. That was Adam Warlock that got introduced at the end of the movie, but Adam Warlock's not going to be a part of Infinity War. Sorry. And it's like, well, what the fuck? He says he knows that he was part of Infinity War in the comic books, and that he was a central character, but he's just not going to be part of it for the movie. So again, it's just another one of those things where it's like, yeah, okay, I know you guys can do whatever you want, and you don't give a shit about canon or continuity or anything. And today, who really knows who Adam Warlock is, right? But that was a little disappointing, but at the same time, it was still so cool to see. As soon as they brought in the Sovereign and everything, I was like, "Oh yeah, Adam Warlock's coming, baby!" But because that's a very fun character. And yeah, there was some other shit with the end credits, but that was kind of those were the two of the bigger deals I felt coming out of it. So yeah. Good film. The other interesting thing, and I'm not the only person that thought about this, it is interesting, and also James Gunn and Kevin Feige said that they never talked about Empire Strikes Back, but this movie is very Empire Strikes Back. You got the daddy issues, you got the, it's Ego and not Cloud City, but, Ego with this kind of everything looks beautiful, but there's actually a dark secret. There's a lot of easy comparisons to Empire Strikes Back and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 that I think are very fair to ask about. Of course, what does it matter? Disney owns Star Wars, so they can do whatever the fuck they want, and they own Marvel, obviously. Again, good film. I'm just going to leave it at that. But those were kind of my minor issues. Really, the major issue with it is that the soundtrack just really kind of stunk. I thought it was funny, and this is at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert: when he gets the Zune, he gets his Microsoft Zune player. I thought that was fantastic. He's like, oh yeah, it's got 300 songs or something. So obviously, the music can be a little more updated since Star-Lord has access to, Peter Quill has access to 300 songs on the Zune, which is a more modern device. But I thought that was so funny that he got a Zune. Everybody was laughing. That was the amazing thing. In the theater I was in, people were laughing right and left. Some of the jokes I thought fell a little flat. They were a little forced, didn't really work out. But then there were plenty of them that were very funny. And just a lot of cool little nods here and there to the larger Marvel universe, even though obviously they're changing things drastically, in the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe in general. So anyway, yeah, easily recommend the movie. It's a great movie. Here's the other point that I thought, and you'll probably be shocked that I'm going to say this. Talk about something that was forced. I think the movie was honestly, it was a little too 80s. Like, I mean, there's just neon everywhere. Everything's fucking neon. And I love that, and I hope that the universe is all fucking neon, okay, when it finds, or, at least the solar system when it gets colonized by humans, which is happening in the near future. But that felt forced. Like, they were trying too hard to be the 80s. And it just wasn't. Maybe if the music was better, if the music was a little more 80s centric, like if they were playing Richard Marx or Rick Springfield or, I don't know, the Romantics, or something like that, maybe, maybe it would have felt, or, Flock of Seagulls or something, maybe it would have felt a little more 80s. But, like, I think the music and the style, I don't know, it seemed forced. It didn't feel right. Like, they were definitely going for the 80s tone, but something about it felt off. It almost felt like it was, like I said, it was just trying too hard. It was too 80s. And there's no such, in my, normally in my, mental lexicon, there's no such thing as too 80s or too neon. Like, there's just no such fucking thing. But this movie felt like it. So I was... Yeah, that felt a little weird to me. Didn't really take anything away from the film. It just felt weird. So, all right, that's it. Great movie. Go see it. Despite those minor points, I thought it was a fantastic film. Story was good. Movie was very funny, and had some, like I said, Drax was laying out some very, very interesting thoughts. Concepts really that you didn't see coming. And just a good time, and a lot of nice little nods to the larger Marvel universe and seeing things kind of come to reality. It was and Stallone was great too. I thought Stallone was really cool. So there you go. Whew, all right, that's enough. I told you it'd just be an hour, and I went an hour and 30. God damn it. Anyway, still no new Sex and Science Hour this week, but there will be a new Sovereign Tech, and it's a very special one, and I'm looking forward to it. And then we have episode 226, where I should have the new intros ready to go, and these are going to be hot as hell, you know it. So I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.